We, we as a society have been taking Pokemon for granted. Now, what do I mean when I say something like that? It's in the sense when every single time there's a new game in the series, a new incarnation of the intro about to come out, the same complaints that the series doesn't take any risks that they just keep resting on their laurels and they don't feel the need to move the needle forward. I mean, just the same stuff every single time, and I'm well aware here of how things are right now in this current situation, but in this scenario, I'm here to put that notion behind me personally. I used to hold this mentality, but now I've made videos like this on the past about my former experience as a gym warner, and now I feel it's necessary to do something similar, or given how this current movement, to be honest, just isn't that different at all from things they said when the series first got started. So let's get this going. Hmm. I mean, if you were to basically compare, if someone were just at randomly just to immediately make this claim about how it's yellow and as well as the Ultra Sun and Moon, and I would basically ever so sarcastically he claim, oh yeah, I mean the exact same gameplay style, the exact same visuals, the exact same in through line from the moment you press start to the moment you reach the end of the journey. But don't worry, I don't think anyone I know or even seen has ever made that specific argument. However, let's take ones that actually do have similar design philosophies, such as Sun and Moon, as well as Black and White. I mean, think about it. Where you have a setting that's influenced by the U.S. mainly rather than Japan. You have a have a gameplay style and story structure that subverts expectations by basically putting you in the same scenario as you would as someone playing as the first time, and you have a have a argument of why they're not moving on to the next console instead of developing the existing one. But that's the kind of outlook you get when you only look at the games at purely surface level, while also not really taking into account how different the actual tone of the matter is. It's because whereas Generation 7 focuses more on Alola's as naturalistic settings, lanes, and how sometimes strange things can be occurred every day. Hey, and whereas as Black and White are very much an urban fantasy in the purest sense of the word. Basically, one of the clearest parallels with Earthbound I've seen in the series is being right down to basically being in the setting of New York City and surrounding areas seen through a Japanese tinted lens. And so it's kind of like another sort of Mario 64 Mario Odyssey argument, whereas as Odyssey definitely has different ways of approaching the mechanics and the listeners will influence, and also with comparing Ocarina of Time to Breath of the Wild in terms of how both of them use the world as integral to the story, but Breath of the Wild plus its retrograde focus on the fish out temple water aspect, where not exactly like coming in from recess, but more like you've been asleep for a century and you really need to try much harder to not only bring this kingdom back from the brink, but also rediscover the truth about who you are. Are and it's definitely astonishing how over the course of the past 23 years, how among the mainline games or RPGs, there has not been a single objectively bad entry in the series. Is in spite of what others might believe. He basing off purely objective reception among on the press and players. And depending on which ones you let's look at, that's something not even Final Fantasy could manage. I mean, given if the how divisive 13 its installments still remain many. I mean, I could go on all night about how each of the main installments has a deliberate reason to exist and tells a deliberate piece in the story, a, which all is tied together with each passing year. But that would definitely take far too long. So, for sake of argument, let's just keep it just that and how each piece of story plays out. I mean, while it's true that the basic concept has thankfully not changed that much. Whether you're young still setting off from home, travel across the land, searching far and wide, to understand the pirates inside, so to speak. But like any good game series has gone on for a certain amount of time, it's the way that each installment uses that concept have have his in a unique way. How each of the settings of the series is deliberately tied to that concept or explores that concept in a unique way. Hey, I mean, in a sense, given how both Hoenn and Alola explore the whole aspect of being a new kid in town in a way that's simple and relatable, well, we may not be riding in the back of a van and having a Machop as movers. It's a simple but effective way of putting the player into the world and how making the player here a cipher actually makes sense given by stepping into their who a nice pair of running shoes gives them a way of exploring the world on their own terms. How in specific case of the upcoming one, that's why I'm not as bothered by the changes as a lot of other people are. Given how to me he a lot of the he he capturing everything was just the secondary quest. The main part of I've enjoyed at its core is just not only learning about how to who who conquer your rivals and get better against them, but also to learn about yourself and get better at yourself and how each game I even took a break for a while, but I think Platinum was definitely one that cemented me at this, and how that was the one that really set a lot. Generation 4 set down a lot of concept we use today, and given how the series is going to be, he really looked into again soon. But given that, well, most franchises would definitely be lucky to have only a couple acclaimed hits on the record. I think Pokemon is really unique among other series that is that they've haven't really had any major critical misses in spite of what's too much water.com may tell you. Since I mean, given how they've gone more than 20 years without a game that's been generally bad, had to definitely keep that streak alive, and so it's time to maybe lay to rest the notion that they would do what they're claiming. I mean, and on that note, I would like to switch gears and talk about some of the adaptations as well, with particular focus on other ones as a subject of divisiveness. Now, surrounding the anime, hey, that is also one that has been and given a lot of stuff coming on. Like it happens to as another one I've experienced personally, where every time people start getting used to the current adaptation, they start a new one, which kind of starts a cycle. And often more than the games, I submit it's kind of like the whole franchise kind of like has the opposite Sonic cycle going, where the Sonic cycle often revolves around optimism, big disappointment, and repeats. This one is often more greeted with cynicism, met with relief, and again repeats. It's those kind of loops. But here's the rub. While other people still keep wishing that they just change things up, but in other ways, by keeping a focus on the same central character as the emotional center of the story, it actually makes sense logistically how I know that Ashi Boy or Satoshi Kun, whoever you want to call him, may be a common archetype among these characters, but then again, so someone like say Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, or Son Goku, who I mean, whereas Takeshi Shudo, who was definitely not the first person to expect to write a series about children, he still took his audience seriously, even and though a series is often dismissed as simple fluff meant solely between school children. I mean, they manage to go through the same kind of emotional highs and lows that a viewer might have in their lifetime, with just the simple heads with a trio of anger, sorrow, and joy. Right? And in some cases, you can also add fear and disgust in there in the mix. And as over the past 22 seasons, including the upcoming main one that's going to be starting next week, by the time you see this, each subsequent and group writers animators has contributed to this premise in a unique and interesting way. How he relates the other characters and settings has been actually integral to the story again. And the tone has also managed to strike a nice balance between being silly, often colorful action, as well as actually managing to pretty effectively convey hey, its its setting and tell interesting stories with interesting characters. Actually, a lot better than other series that have tried to claim its title, which shall not be mentioned here as a argument. And I mean, one standout, some standouts I've clinched on the more recent ones, especially in my book, where how one's like Diamond and Pearl and Black and White, while both different on the surface, again, we start peeling about those layers. Here's each of those manages to contribute something unique to the story their own way. Hey, how one of them deals with a rival who arguably rivals some of the best villains of the series, in terms of what they do. Who another tells a story that focuses on the on the setting and doesn't bring in its major antagonist until way later. Even though the real life events do play a factor in this, and it also helps that they use what's happened in the story in a unique way. And some people call them strawmen. I prefer to think of them as conflicting, and also how this is a deliberate choice, at least by either the writers after the initial plan ended up being definitely postponed, and also in the case of the X and Y series and how that series, even with the Mega Evolution specials, is not being great. Hey, in my book, they are still did manage to find a way to work them into the plot thread that's going on. Um, because sometimes you don't just need a champion and to take on a threat that could potentially shatter the entire region. You need a hero, and they found one. And they didn't realize at the time. They may have. A lot of people thought they wanted a different one, but the one that they needed was looking right at them the entire time. And overall, it ended up, even with how people felt about how the outcome of its later episodes, definitely one of my favorite incarnations of the series and a good show overall. On that note, this also actually made the transition, and actually not as much of a stretch as many people might think at first glance. Again, which is what happens when we only focus on the purely surface level of each season and not look at the details hiding beneath the surface of this. Where because this actually does make sense why he decided to go to Alola and study there part time after what happened in Kalos. Given how after her fighting in all these gyms as well as an entire evil force for the equivalent of 3 years and 140 episodes, he's definitely he had a lot going on. What do you do after you go into that? Like, why? You go on vacation, of course, which also allowed Hiro Tomioka, who's been working in the industry a long time, mind you, to actually reinterpret this in a way that makes sense. How both a determined young man that always wants to do the right thing no matter the cost, and a laid back student and beach bum can both represent the character different ways. I mean, like sort of James Bond analogy where one version can be dark and realistic and how he fights international threats. Another can be more swaggering and campy while he's trying to defuse a bomb or dress as a clown. Miss you, Roger Moore. And that's just an aside there. And also, this also makes sense how they incorporated characters and how rather than try and mainly create OCs for their hero series, they try to draw as much from um, already existing characters as possible, whether we hadn't seen them in years or just were relatively new to us, and interpret them in ways that were unique and made sense for the story. Made sense. Also, on that note, George Sim as a whole paints a different portrait of the Pokemon world. Rather than traveling around the region, this actually is a conscious effort to show by with the island archipelago setting what day-to-day life is in the series. Of course, there's a lot of kids would be interested in Pokemon. Of course, there's a lot of people on the islands would be trying to use them in their schemes. Of course, the tournament would be taking place in a way that everyone, whether they can play the challenge or not, can participate. Right? And that's definitely a honestly astonishing, especially given how, as much as I like the X and Y series, I think the Sun and Moon is another case of joining one of my favorite regions, given how of 146 episodes, again over 3 years worth of content, there's only one I just thought was okay. Since and even that one actually was somewhat enjoyable, given how it used the relatively OP Ultra Beast inside in a way that was actually kind of amusing overall. Oh, and this was again a conscious effort among the various animators to create something and that for everyone to enjoy. So and sometimes when I tell a good story, all you need are simple things that any audience, whether they're 10 or 27 or older or younger, can identify with. I mean, any any TV series that can and bring tears of joy to your eyes, eyes with by seeing a grass hedgehog fly in the sky, is definitely doing something right. I mean, by focusing less on the timeline and more on the experience, this has allowed the series to maintain a consistently high quality over many years. Here's I mean, here's with which is often not the singular vision of any one individual, despite what others may claim, but often a collaborative effort not only among developer that started it, but also on every subsequent and developer and individual that's helped shape the series into what it is, as well as to those who are fans of it. And which is definitely again a deliberate way to help it connect with audiences. I mean, the only other franchise that shaped my life I can actually think is having a similar impact that might actually be Zelda, and even that's has been the product of many developers and a timeline which has often been very hard to parse even when there are official statements given. And how many other series can you think of that have had this kind of consistent quality over 23 years? How many have have been able to keep the gameplay a good from Kanto to Johto to Hoenn, Sinnoh, Unova, Alola, and beyond, and without having to hand the reins to another company? Hey, how many other TV series can adapt to a changing landscape and surpass 1,000 episodes, those more than 20 movies, these including a year that had their first live action CGI ones, and when other franchises don't even get a fraction of that. That and all of it can often just stem from a simple well, notion. Also can get people who had been before that point had not all been that familiar with video games or anime before then, and to people like me, indeed. I mean, even with 5 days remaining to the launch of the newest title, and while the series may not always be as on the same magnitude as Mario or Zelda have been at their best, as I'm going to argue, who, if I may, that in some respects it actually has come very close, and and often with some of the simplest archetypes you can imagine that have managed to guide us all through the journey. An amorous breeder who wants to help people and Pokemon alike. A self-proclaimed most beautiful girl who wants to master water Pokemon and earn respect of her sisters. There's a young chef who wants to make her family restaurant a place where everyone can feel like they're at home. A young man with fire in his heart who wants to carry on his grandfather's legacy. An insecure, nerdy young man who wants to go to space. Yes. A fisher person with flights of fancy who wants to unravel all the mysteries of the ocean. A 10-year-old boy who sleeps in his first day on his journey, who becomes the first champion of a new region. And while I will never forget the first time I was able to beat some of the Mario games, either on my own or with the help of people close to me, in terms of the overall impact it's left on my life, Pokemon's left a bigger mark. In terms of the heroes I want to be like and want to model myself after, and the villains I both fear and respect. In a sense, Red and Blue are like Mario and Luigi. Pikachu and Charizard are like my Bowser and Yoshi. Hey, I mean, Giovanni is indeed a very much but a villain I would definitely respect as much as I fear here. And while Mario may have started my I love video games, I think Pokemon overall was what cemented it, and my fascination continues to this day. I cannot think of any higher praise than that.